I'm introducing Senate Bill 34. I'm Senator Ruth Ward, and I represent Senate District 8. Today, I have the privilege of introducing for your consideration SB 34. This bill was a recommendation from the Committee to Study Consent and Confidentiality Laws applicable to adolescent and young adult health care in New Hampshire. It would require schools to obtain parental consent for each new service that is provided to a student under the Medicaid to Schools program. Also, it would require certain legislative policy committees to receive reports regarding the Medicaid to Schools program. The intent is to provide transparency, protect parental involvement, and ensure that a continuity of care is provided to adolescents and young adults. This is more important than ever, especially since the Federal Register proposed the removal of parental consent altogether for services in 2023. This poses concerns for adolescents and young adults, especially for those in the disability community who rely on parental involvement in their services. I know there are advocates here who will be able to answer any questions the committee may have, so I will leave it to those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Do any committee members have any questions for Senator Ward? Senator Alschuler.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairwoman Ward. You just mentioned that this bill comes from a study committee that was looking at, could you tell me again what the study committee? Yeah. What the name of the study committee was, what they were doing?
The study committee, and this was a recommendation.
Yeah.
Majority recommendation.
Right. What was the committee? It went really quickly. I didn't hear the name of the committee.
Committee to Study Consent and Confidentiality Laws applicable to adolescent and young adult health care in New Hampshire.
Follow up.
Yes.
So the committee came up with this recommendation and it looked at adolescent health care, but this particular bill is for every child, right? From K on. Was there any consideration in taking this recommendation from the committee and tailoring it to what was actually recommended, which was for adolescents, not to make it a blanket?
I can't tell you I don't have that report in front of me, so I can't
Yeah.
tell you the specifics.
May I follow up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Would the chair be open to amending it to better reflect the work that was done by the committee so that it be more tailored specifically to the work that was done regarding adolescents, since studying K through, I'm going to assume you stopped at middle school for that's adolescents, so elementary school not be included in this?
I can't say yes or no without looking at the report first.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Senator Ward. And we've got the sign-in sheet with people who've signed up in support, not in support, neutral, as well as who would like to speak. I'll let Senator Ward run the table on speaking. I highlighted next to who you might.
Everybody wants to speak.
Not everybody. Some people said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who wants to speak?
So looks like actually Sean Parr from the Manchester's speaking.
Okay. Sean Parr.
Looks like-
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Ward, and thank you to the members of the committee for allowing me to speak. My name is Sean Parr, and I am on the Manchester School Board, where I chair the Education Legislation Committee. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the Manchester School Board, which has authorized me to advocate for bills that reduce the administrative burden on localities for Medicaid to schools. We are opposed to SB 34 because it increases that burden. In requiring schools to obtain parental consent for each new service that is provided to the student under the Medicaid to Schools program, this bill would greatly increase administrative labor and could jeopardize students receiving timely services, especially considering families with language barriers, parents who work multiple jobs, and families who are already overburdened. Having to get those multiple consents when parents have already been granted Medicaid asks too much of families, many of whom are struggling to make ends meet. I checked with our district's administration and they agree. This is a billing issue. Students need these services, and the question is whether the district can bill Medicaid or not. And with the increasing costs and numbers of services, Medicaid support of our students is needed more than ever. If a Medicaid student first needs speech therapy, then mid-year needs physical therapy, then later specialized transportation, they should receive those services, and we should be able to bill Medicaid without needing 3 separate parent consent forms in order to do the billing. SB 34 would affect every IEP Manchester student, because every time an IEP is amended or updated, we would have to get a signed parental consent. In our district of 12,000 students, about 3,000 have an IEP. It would be extremely difficult to implement this. And another consequence is that we would likely not be able to reconcile billing for auditing purposes until the end of the school year for the sake of accuracy. If we have to bill Medicaid at the end of the year, we won't have an accurate budget number for the next year to let the business office project the next school budget. And if the state is moving to a cost-effective Medicaid system in 2026, which will require quarterly data and billing, how can they expect accurate quarterly billing when there are so many moving parts? SB 34 adds another barrier to schools receiving the funding they need to best serve our students. Less money from Medicaid to schools means districts will have to burden the local taxpayer in order to provide these services. We should be finding ways to make it easier for our struggling families, not harder. Please vote no on this bill. Thank you for your consideration.
Any questions from the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. And thank you, Sean, for taking my question. So when my daughter had both an IEP and then a 504, and I had regular meetings with the special ed folks at the school, as well as, different school administrators when questions came up. And along those lines, all of the services that were provided, and some of them weren't as, say, extensive, but just for sake of this conversation, as extensive as you've outlined in terms of different therapies that can be billed for, there were opportunities to talk about this. So my question to you is, aren't these conversations already happening, and are parents already at the table and engaged in the chain, either additions or subtractions in therapies?
Yes, for
programs
sure.
that may be available that are ultimately become billable. So
Yes, for sure. The parents are involved at every stage. But we do have some parents who are not able to come to those meetings there. And when they can't come to those meetings, we of course send notifications. We of course reach out as much as we can. But there are occasions when we are not able to actually have contact with those parents there because they're not responding to those inquiries and those notifications. I mean, we have on the order of 800 housing insecure students in the district as well. So we're talking, there are many, many families who need services and deserve those services. And once they're granted Medicaid, they start to receive those services. But if we have to reach out and try to notify those parents and reach out to them in ways, and we don't get responses there, the students still need those services there. And we need to be able to provide those services to the students.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Parr. We serve the same community. And would you agree that the families that you're talking about, the families that are the most in need of these services, are the ones that need the most communication and understanding and the time to sit down and explain what these services actually are so they can support it with their children at home?
Of course, and that's why we reach out in multiple languages. We reach out via different forms of communication, phone. We talk to them as much as we can in person when we can see them, mail, all of those things. We have liaisons who reach out and go to their houses also to reach out to them. We try as many means as we can to discuss these important matters with them. Yes.
Any other questions? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for taking my question. I wonder if you could explain how a child that receives a number of services may have those services modified midstream, because I think that's some of what causes a little heartburn up here at this table for some. So in the types of services covered, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language, applied behavior analysis, vision audiology, how in the course of enrolling a student in one particular type of service, you may uncover the need for another.
Yes.
So, and how that rolls out. Explain that for those multiply complex
Right.
children.
So
for
I'm-
whom it's more than just learning how to.
Sure. So we
flip
have a
pencil in
system that we've
OT.
been putting in place called multi-tiered systems of
Thank
support.
you. Yes.
That negotiates those changes there, and there is a very clear process to make sure that the families are involved in those changes.
Senator Sullivan?
Thank you for that information. So then would you agree that this wouldn't be a heavier burden because you're already doing those processes? This is just verification for the district to sort of cover us?
It would still be an additional burden because we do currently there's a one-time initial parental consent for Medicaid to schools, and then there's a required federal notification each year, and we follow those rules, those guidelines each year. But what I'm saying is that some parents are not able to be involved in those meetings there, and we still need to be able to make those services available to those children, even if they are not able to make those meetings in person.
What's that?
could just have-
Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Senator Ward. And again, thank you for taking my
Sure.
question. Have you ever had a concern come up from a family that believes that a service that has been provided to their child was inappropriate, unnecessary, or not in line with the IEP or 504 that was already in place?
I am not aware of that, but I am not the special education coordinator there, so I feel like I would not be able to say based on 3,000 students that that's never happened there. I do know that I think it's more common that parents want more services, not less, and I also think that if the fear is that parents won't be able to decline those services, they do have many options to decline, and we have rarely seen parents decline services. Very rarely. What's difficult is getting them to sign the forms at the beginning of each year and to have those initial meetings there. But it's very rare for parents to decline services.
Just do a quick
Follow-up?
It's kind of sort of a follow-up. I just want to clarify on the Medicaid side. So if services are outlined in a plan and they are billable services and there was the inability to consent or a parent refused consent, where does that student then fall? Are you saying that if they need the services, they're going to get them, but the taxpayers would have to cover that in the school
Correct.
district versus the federal funds that are already available to cover
Correct,
it?
unless the parent declines the service altogether.
Okay. Good. I just wanted to be clear on that. I was looking at a CFR, a notice from the Department of Education that talks about this responses to questions received from billing agents that was put out in 2022.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Thank
Thank you
Senator
very
Ward.
much.
Thank you for your
testimony.
time.
Catherine Stoddard?
Christine Stoddard. there you go.
Oh, Christine, I'm sorry.
That's okay. May I bring Betsy with me? She's
They
next.
both start with a K, right?
Hey,
And I forgot my glasses, so who knows what I wrote now.
I don't have any spares with me. I did let Mike Rollo wear my glasses once. If you really need to, I'll let you.
Yes, you do. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We don't get to come before you many times, so I will, so please be patient with us. I'd like Betsy Burtis to come with me as well. She's from Amoskeag Health.
Okay.
So my name is Christine Stoddard, and I represent community health centers throughout the state. All committee members are blessed with being served by health centers in the state of New Hampshire. Some of you have multiple health centers in your districts. Our health centers serve over 100,000 patients, 20% of which are children. Our health centers participate in the Medicaid to Schools program. And we have a number of questions about this bill. I think that I understand what you're trying to accomplish, which is you want parents to be engaged and obtain consent before services are provided. But the administrative burden that comes with the way the bill is worded, I think will not result in patients getting services that they need and kids getting services that they need. I have a child who's autistic, has sensory processing disorder, and ADHD. I participate in every IEP meeting. I am constantly emailed with updates on how he's doing, but I don't think it is possible that I would be able to provide consent before every single time a clinician speaks to my son throughout the day, because it's often. I have a full-time job, as you know. I'm here every day of the week almost, and I am not on my home email. I don't answer my phone during committee meetings. It would be hard for me to consent to every single time my son has to speak to a clinician throughout the day. We also have concerns that I wanted Betsy to highlight on how the billing process would work and what it would mean for the patients and also the providers. It's really about getting care to the students that need them, not the administrative burden. But the administrative burden will result in health centers not getting paid in a timely manner. As many of you know, our healthcare system is in dire straits right now. It's hard for health centers to have accounts receivable out. So this would be very, very difficult for them to balance on the health centers' backs if they were not getting paid by the Medicaid program. I also would like to highlight the fact that my son is not on Medicaid, except he's receiving the same services that a Medicaid student would be receiving. We have private insurance. This bill would treat Medicaid patients differently than it would treat commercially insured patients, and I don't understand the goal of that. Kids should be treated the same regardless of their insurance status, and health centers treat patients regardless of their insurance status. And this bill is asking our health centers to treat two similarly situated children differently just because of their insurance status. I'd be happy to answer any questions after Betsy has the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Well, do you want to have a question first before we have Betsy?
I do, because I think this is just, you might be able to, first of all, thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
Good morning. And I think for either yours or all the community health centers, you may be able to answer this. Do you know what you bill out in total for Medicaid as related?
I don't know the total dollar amount, but our health centers payer mix is 35% Medicaid. It is, without Medicaid, our health centers would struggle to keep their doors open.
So is that 30, follow up,
Follow-up.
I think 35% for everything or for student-related services that are outlined in an IEP or 504?
Sure, 35% of all health centers' payer mix is Medicaid.
Okay, so that's,
If you look at Betsy's Health Center, which is one of our biggest, their budgets are over $20 million. So it's a significant amount of money, especially if you consider that 20% of their patients are children and predominantly Medicaid insured.
okay, thank you.
Betsy, your turn.
Good morning. I'm Betsy Burtis from Amoskeag Health in Manchester, New Hampshire. We are the federally qualified health center for the greater Manchester area. I am the chief operating officer there. And Christine asked me to come along because we have been providing services in the schools for many years, many years. And I think I truly understand the issues that this bill is trying to address, and confidentiality and consent are critically important to us. We protect that very carefully. Where I think that this bill is going to have a hard time being administered is that if it's every change in an ICD-10 code, a diagnosis code, that is going to severely delay services. So for example, we provide mental health services in the schools, and we do get consent, of course, and but a child may come in presenting with one set of symptoms and have one diagnosis code, and then at the next visit, it may be something that's more severe or less severe, and the diagnosis changes, and so would the ICD-10 code. So to get a release every single time that that diagnosis changed, even within the same provider, would be extremely burdensome and would hold up services to our kids, and provide an additional administrative burden to our parents as well. One of the things that we've learned about providing services in the schools is that parents generally want their kids to be seen and quickly. And we had a physical health, acute health setting in the in both Beach and Goslar schools last year, and we had to get consent, even if the kid was showing up with 105 fever and needed to be seen right away. We had to get consent and should get consent for treatment for that. But when it's an acute care issue, chasing a parent who, in Christine's situation, or like many of the parents that Mr. Parr spoke about, is extremely difficult to then provide timely care.
Questions from the committee? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you very much. So in the example that you gave, you're working with a child that has mental health issues and the diagnosis changes. Wouldn't you think the parents would be the first call on that to approve the treatment, because they would want to know of the change in their child, right? Because they want to support them at home. So I would think that the parents would be the first people that are contacted. So the changing of the code is that's just a procedural thing, but the parents would have to come in to speak about a new treatment plan for them anyway, correct?
It would not necessarily require a new treatment plan. If somebody comes in with depression, and it's initially said, I've got some letters here from some of our staff, so it might come in with a diagnosis of depression single episode, which is ICD-10 F32, and then the student comes back in the week or 2 weeks following and is still depressed, then that diagnosis code changes to recurring depression, which would then require an additional consent, even though the treatment itself is essentially the same.
Follow up?
Yes. Thank you. So you're saying now if the treatment changed, there isn't consent required? Is that what you just
I'm
said?
saying that the treatment itself, I fully respect what this bill is trying to do. I'm just not sure doing it based on the ICD-10 code changing is the right way to accomplish it, because it's a single treatment. So if you're getting mental health services and the diagnosis code changes from week to week based on what's happening with the kiddo, then consent would have to be gotten at every single one of those points, which would be extremely burdensome to parents.
May I clarify? So just using my son again as an example, his overarching diagnosis is autism. He sees a school psychologist. If the school psychologist visit goes from 1 hour to 30 minutes, 1 week to the next, I would have to give consent because he couldn't sit still long enough in that second visit that was then reduced to 30 minutes, because those are two different billing codes. So his diagnosis hasn't changed. The services that the school has provided haven't changed, but how long he was in the room with that clinician did change, and that's a different code. So if there's a way to word it where it's the last few words that are the problem, defined by a new diagnostic billing code, that's the issue. It's not the consent, it's not the treatment, it's not the services being provided. It's the way that the bill is worded, because every single visit has different codes with it, even if the service plan hasn't changed.
Follow up?
Yeah. You. So if we change that line, do you support the bill?
I don't know that we would support it, Senator Sullivan. I'd have to look at the language and talk it over with our members. But yes, we would love to see the language changed. We are in full support of consent and firmly believe that parents should be involved in their children's treatment if appropriate. But we don't want to put any more burdens on families or the patients that are trying to access timely services.
Thank you.
I would ask you to write something down in what you like to see, how it could be changed so that parents are involved, the child gets the services it needs. Give us some help on that. So if you two could work together and send something in to Ryan, that we would have it for our record, that would be very, very helpful for us.
We're happy to help.
Thank you very much. Senator Prentice.
Senator Ward, Christine and Betsy, thanks for taking my question. And actually, Christine, either one of you can answer this, but have you had a problem with any child being treated without consent that has come to your attention?
I am not aware of any, but I'd ask Betsy to.
No, I'm not aware of any either.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you both very much, and we look forward to your suggestions for how to make this better.
Marie Banfield.
Emery Banfield.
Good morning, committee
Morning.
members. Thank you for taking my testimony. My name is Anne Marie Banfield. I am a parental rights advocate focused on education in New Hampshire. I come here in support of SB 34. There are good reasons for parents consenting on any medical or mental health services when it comes to Medicaid billing. Parents can be gatekeepers for the government. Having one extra set of layer confirming treatment can reduce Medicaid fraud. Medicaid school billing has come under fire. Parents in Texas saw what they described as odd entries for their children's accounts. After investigation, they discovered a number of claims from health services providers. After calls to the health insurance company, state Medicaid, and even law enforcement, it was determined that the Medicaid insurance was never used, thus not compromised, but someone was putting charges on the health insurance account under the name of Texas Medicaid. After further review, it was determined that these originated from the school district. Parents reviewing these accounts offer another layer of protection when it comes to mistakes. Medicaid billing mistakes can result in fraud investigations with serious, long-lasting consequences. Providers may be required to pay back up to 3 times the amount they were paid for improperly billed services. If the government finds that the improper billing was intentional, providers can face criminal charges, the loss of professional licenses, and exclusion from participation in Medicaid. So again, having parents review this also helps correct any mistakes. Just a fraud investigation can shut down services to children who receive therapy in school. In Florida, school services were shut down for 6 months pending an investigation. And then I'm going to give you this. There's an article about autistic children caught up in Medicaid fraud investigation. The agency cited widespread fraud and abuse, such as overbilling for services. Parents need to make sure that the services billed are the services provided. Why is parental consent important? Parental consent protects student privacy by ensuring that sensitive information is not shared without knowledge. It avoids legal issues. Parental consent protects schools from legal issues that may arise if they share student information without consent. Parental consent allows for the sharing of information between healthcare providers and schools. This law would serve as a safeguard against the unauthorized disclosure of sensitive student information. Without proper consent, schools risk a student's right to privacy by sharing personally identifiable information for billing purposes. Obtaining informed consent ensures that parents or eligible students are aware of the information being shared and have the opportunity to control its dissemination. I urge you to pass SB 34, and I will give you an example of where this was a problem, where I did receive a call from a parent who explained that his son was given a psych evaluation in school and that he was never notified and he did not consent. His son was involved in an incident, and I think he might have been 10 or 12 at the time, where he was in the lunchroom with another boy, and they were playing knives with their plastic knives, as boys do, and he scraped his friend's arm where it had bled. And the little boy had to go down and get a Band-Aid, and his son was given a psych evaluation. I put that gentleman in touch with an attorney immediately to check to see about whether this was legal, but he had signed a blanket form, and unfortunately, the attorney said, I'm not going to take the case. He didn't think it was winnable. The commissioner was notified of this incident, but he is left with a psych evaluation on his son. What's the big deal about that? What's the big deal about coding? What's the big deal about all of that? Well, if his son decides to go into the military and go into officer training, is that something that's going to come back and haunt him? If he goes into the police force, is that something that's going to come back and haunt him? They did a psych evaluation on his son in a school, and now that is technically information. So would he have supported something like that? My guess is probably no. He was pretty angry on the phone. I think for most parents, they would look at it like, this is boys having fun, they got hurt. So there are those incidents that happen from time to time. That's all I wanted to present to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Becky Wilson? Hello there.
Good morning, Chair Ward and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. By way of introduction and for the record, my name is Becky Wilson. I serve as the Director of Governmental Relations for the New Hampshire School Boards Association. For those of you that I have not worked with previously, prior to this role, which I've been in for about 5 years, I served as a district level special education director for 20 years here in the state of New Hampshire. We are not taking a position on this bill today. However, I did want to offer some information to the committee that potentially could be useful if this bill does move forward. This bill was actually put forward last year prior to the study committee being put in and has been amended and changed a bit from that. I want to qualify that the IEP services and a 504, if there are services as part of a 504, they have their own separate consent requirements. So just to clarify, this should not, at least in the school setting, hold up any students getting services that have been consented to by the parents as part of the IEP or 504 process. And not all services that students receive qualify as part of the Medicaid to Schools program. Medicaid to Schools is very specific about medically necessary services that are provided in a school environment so students can access their educational environment and their education setting. So the consent requirements for the IEP and whether or not a parent consents to a service is separate from the Medicaid to Schools consent. So as far as we understand it, this bill, the way it's currently written, would not necessarily affect whether a child is getting services at the school. It really only affects whether or not the school district is able to be reimbursed for the cost of some of those services that are being provided in the school setting. As you may know, and this is the piece that we would like the committee to consider, the Medicaid to Schools program is undergoing a very large change this year that will affect school districts starting in the 26-27 school year. DHHS is currently in the process of an RFP process to secure a vendor to provide training to local districts throughout the state about these major changes to the billing processes for Medicaid to Schools. So we would respectfully ask that this committee, if this bill goes forward, speak with Henry Littman from DHHS, who is in charge of the Medicaid to Schools program, to determine what the start date will be for those changes that are already coming, so that any consent changes that would be made to this bill or to the Medicaid to Schools program be incorporated into this very significant training that is going to be provided to districts so that districts can put into effect these changes with fidelity. When we went through a Medicaid to Schools change in 2018 with how things were documented and billed, I think we've all learned from that process. That was quite a messy process, to be honest. Districts lost a lot of ability to recoup funds. It was messy. There was documentation was confusing. That was because I think that process was not rolled out as smoothly as we have the opportunity potentially to do here with these changes that are coming. But that RFP process is already going. I believe the bids are due at the end of this month to DHHS, and that those will then be going to Governor and Council, I believe, for approval, whatever the vendor is that's providing the training. So if this bill were to move forward, we would respectfully just ask that there not be an effective date that is different than the effective date for the other changes that are coming to Medicaid to schools, so that districts can really do a good job identifying which staff need to be trained on how to document this kind of consent, what are the forms that are going to be used to document the consent, et cetera. Because right now, changing that midstream and then changing a bunch of other documentation and routines at the school district level, I think puts districts at a possibility, again, of doing something unintentionally that could cause an audit down the road. And then, yes, as I think a previous speaker said, a Medicaid audit, sometimes if they find that there are concerns about how things were documented, the district can be then on the hook to have to return money to the government, to the feds for that program. And we want to make sure that districts are able to implement this program with the highest fidelity, because that money that they're able to get reimbursed for, it is a reimbursement. It is not a forward kind of funding that comes. Most districts, although not all, then return that revenue to the town to help offset the tax rate. And we do not want a messy implementation of all of these changes to affect school districts' ability to recoup the money that they should be able to recoup for this with the cost-based changes that are coming. Because down the road, there will be, I think, a better opportunity for districts to recoup appropriate amounts of money to then hopefully help them the tax rate in their town. Lastly, I would just ask that if this were to go forward, this is a much higher parental consent requirement than what is asked for in the current Medicaid to Schools program. We have in the state a list of special ed rules that are in excess of the federal rules. This is a similar situation where you are going to be asking for a much higher level of consent than what is required by the federal program. The reason it's important to incorporate something that's in excess is so that when people are wondering how come we're having more cost associated with special education, a lot of that is a state decision based on we choose to exceed what is being asked at the federal level. So with that, sometimes we incur more cost. This is a similar situation where there's a chance that if parents need to consent to every single service that a student is getting that could potentially qualify for Medicaid to Schools, districts could see a decrease in their revenue, and local taxpayers are going to want to understand how that is impacting the revenues that are coming back to the district. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, you did a good job.
Thank you.
No questions. Thank you very much. Janine Archibald. Good morning. Dude, turn on the,
Okay.
thank you.
My name is Janine Archibald. I've been before this committee on behalf of my employer, but today I'm here as an advocate and as a parent. I was approached about this issue from some parents saying that they felt that their children were getting services in schools and they weren't aware of the services being provided. And that seemed strange to me, so I started looking into it, and I asked them, well, have you talked to the school? And they said yes, they had an IEP, but there were services that they felt were being provided outside of the IEP. They weren't able to get resolution through the school, and asked if they had received an explanation of benefits, or so they could see what was being charged to their insurance. And they don't receive that either. So that's exclusive to Medicaid. And I think maybe that's why I have interest in this bill. So the parents are sort of on their own to figure out what services are provided to their child during the school day. Well, the way I look at this bill is the parents providing consent on the IEP, the 504, whatever the health plan is. So they've already given consent. This bill, in my opinion, would ask for parental consent for anything that's outside of the IEP or 504 or health plan. And as a parent myself of a child on a 504, 15 years on with complex medical needs, I would want to know what's not on the IEP. I spent a lot of time sitting with the school, going over her medical situation. I can give you an example. At one time in her career, she has type 1 diabetes. She was very logy late in the afternoon. They thought she needed behavioral counseling. And it was just a low blood sugar. Had I not known or been consulted or partnered with the school, she would have received incorrect treatment. And I can give a million examples of my 15 years along that line. and this is sort of what concerns me the most in researching this. I think the state does a really good job with consent, and I loved our schools. I worked great with them. But now you're getting into where does federal law take precedent over state law? And I've sat in these committee rooms before where I'll use the age of a child with a disability as an example, where they say federal law takes precedent over state law. But then I've also heard lawyers saying that they only write RSAs against state law. So I'm not really sure which one it is. And that's where the kind of confusion sets in. Because if you look at federal law, it's right in the Medicaid guidance. It says services not in a child's IEP can also be covered, including behavioral health services, nursing services, nutrition services, medication monitoring, and counseling. Okay, but if that's provided to my child, I would just want a heads up about that before those services are provided. So I think that's, and then, then we get into all of the different privacy laws. We have HIPAA, we have FERPA, we have Title 10, Title X. I mean, I don't know where these services, if a service is provided in the school district, it might be subject to FERPA laws, which are different than HIPAA laws. And that's a concern to me as a parent too. What is staying in my child's record for the rest of her life? And I can't even access that. I don't know how to get to it through the Medicaid to schools. I don't know. So it's a lot of kind of mystery there that, and maybe the wording of the bill is not appropriate, but somehow the parents need to be involved in anything that's outside of an IEP.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is the last person who signed up to testify for Senate Bill 34. Is there anybody else who wants to say something? If not, this concludes the Senate Bill 34 hearing. Thank you for coming. Here you go. Okay, this is the 59 is next, right? 59. Okay. Senate Bill 59 is next, and the primary sponsor is Senator Waters. Welcome, Senator Waters.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to see you all. Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 59. Before I go through the bill, I want to just give a little background information on the program that was set up 2 years ago based on my bill to establish this recruitment and retention program. And what it did, as you will see in existing statute, is set up a program to provide reimbursement for community college courses for police, fire, EMTs, and the prison guards. And it also established a fund that would help cover the additional costs at the fire academy. And it set up a committee to supervise the program, get it up and running. It had an appropriation of $1 million, and that seems sufficient for the next couple of years to cover the reimbursement costs and the fire academy costs. So what this bill does is it makes some changes that emerge from the first year of experience with the program. We had heard almost immediately at the start that the dispatchers might be included in the program, and that seemed to make a lot of sense. I had been very cautious when we first set it up, not to extend it too far because I wasn't sure how the uptake was going to be and the justification for which group or another, but that seemed to make a lot of sense. So if you turn to the bill on the first page, I'll just go through the changes and I'll talk a little bit more about how the program is going and what our experience has been thus far and its usefulness. So you'll see first that we're adding the public safety, telecommunicators, and dispatchers. So that group will be included in the program. And then the second change down on line 14 is that it seemed to make sense to have reimbursement for non-credit or degree programs. So that the non-credit here is that not every course that might be useful for someone in one of these fields is necessarily leading to a degree program. And there's some particular needs where there are some non-credit training programs that would be useful for the group. So that's in there. The next substantial substantive change you'll see starting on line 17. When I first looked into this a few years ago, I noticed a differential that basically we were covering the costs of the police academy for those who participated in it. So the original bill said if you're going into the fire academy where we're not covering all the costs, that if you completed the fire academy and you were employed in a Hampshire department, then you get a reimbursement for the rest of the costs. Experience showed that in fact there were some expenses in the police academy that are not already covered. This has to do things with equipment and uniform and so forth. So by putting police here, it sets up later in the bill the establishment of the fund, which would be funded with an appropriation. So that there would be a fund that set up for the police academy to do the reimbursements for incidental costs for people. I just pause to say that the principle behind all of this has been that if you want to come in and work for public safety and go to the police or fire academy, we want to support you. And we will demonstrate that by covering your costs. That we're not going to say, yeah, welcome, but by the way, it's going to cost you to get the training. We want you here, and this is why it is a recruitment and retention program. So I think that's an important addition for the fire academy and for those costs. We'll hear some more about what those costs actually are and why this fund will really help the director out to make sure that people who come into the police academy are supported the way I think that they ought to be. Then if you'll turn to the second page, you'll see, well, if we're adding to dispatchers, then they ought to have a seat on this commission or this council group that supervises the program. Further down on page 2 is where the fund is established. This fund, you'll see then on page 3, shall be non-lapsing and used by the Police Standards and Training Council to support the programs established in the subdivision, meaning those extra costs for uniforms and equipment that they are required to have when they get into that and may not be reimbursed or provided by their home departments. And then there's a $125,000 appropriation at the end of it. So let me say just a couple words about the program so far. It got up and running, and the application program, the application forms in paper and online were set up, and there's a very good uptake in the first few months. The program really got started in January of the first year when everything was ready, and then by the first report that was issued, you can find the report of this committee online as they're required. Through July, they had about 46 people enroll. I can give you some kind of update on that the number, always the thought was it was going to grow. And since last July, the amount of fire academy folks who are coming in has tripled their numbers, and a good strong increase in the police, prison guards, and others who are and EMTs taking advantage of it as well. So it really does seem to be working. There was an original $1 million appropriation to cover these tuitions, and so that should take care of whatever expenses we're going to see for the next couple of years in the program. But that extra funding will be particularly for the Police and Fire Standards Academy. The Police Training and Standards Academy. And just for those who are interested, the Fire Academy does have some existing funding from the new vehicle records check. That there's been a fee for a number of years that provides some of the funding for the Fire Academy. So that's the situation. That's where we're at. I think a highly successful program. I'm really, really grateful to Commissioner Quinn and everyone else on that council who has gotten this up and running. When I talk to police departments and talk to police officers and firefighters, they know about it. EMTs, they're taking advantage of it. and in terms of helping with recruitment and retention. Because what it's saying is that if you come to work for us, that you can continue your education, you can get a degree, you can not only upskill yourself for the needs, and it can be in any field, whether it's accounting or social work, some of the areas that people want to go into, that you can count on your years in this program and working for the New Hampshire department, that you're going to upskill yourself. It's going to help you get promoted in your department, but then also when your career is over, you may have opened the door to the second phase of your career after you've done your years, whenever you decide to retire from that. So I'm sorry to take some time, Madam Chair, to go over it, but I thought I'd use this opportunity to report on the program.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from the committee members? I have a question. How, for example, let's talk about the Fire Academy. How long is the program?
I'm going to let those questions go for the folks behind me because I think I kind of know, but I don't remember.
I don't have anybody signed up to speak.
Oh,
So-
well, I think we'll, unless they went upstairs.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, so,
8 to 10 weeks.
yeah. I thought I had the 8, but not the 10.
Okay,
And I will say another part of the program that there's a lot of things that, because the program established, were informally done. For example, actually specifying, you do get some academic credit for your work in the Police and Fire Academy, but it was kind of a generalized credit. And so getting the community college system to specify which requirements those credits could be applied to would make it an easier pathway through your degree program.
Okay.
I would also add that I've been a lot of conversation with the university system about potentially adding that, because the police in particular, it used to be that a lot of police did not have an undergraduate degree. Now most of them already do. So they're interested in further undergraduate work or even graduate work. And I think that we may be able to work something out informally with UNH about tuition breaks over there for that. I forgot to mention too that another change in here, we found the experience, because a lot of these courses can be taken online, that officers in particular felt that they could probably do more than one course. So that's why we say one or more courses, and that will let people move a little more quickly through the degree programs.
okay. Thank you. Now Steve Lavoy.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Steve Lavoy, I'm Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Safety. I'm here today on behalf of the department to testify in support of these changes. This program has really helped to address some of the challenges we have with recruiting in public safety, in law enforcement, in fire, EMTs. We have those same challenges with dispatchers, so it's important to include dispatchers within this program. As Senator Waters mentioned, we're seeing some results, even though it's early on. And so it's critical that we offer them the same opportunities that we offer all of our first responders, trying to encourage people to enter into this important work. I won't rehash a lot of what was said, but questions about the Fire Academy. It's an 8-week program that I referred to. That's the recruit school. That's the full-time program. You can also obtain your Firefighter 1 in about 200 hours. Through the normal course, but full-time recruit school, you earn your Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2, and then you'd be certified as a full-time career firefighter in the state of New Hampshire. And with that, I'd be happy to address any questions that the committee may have.
I had another question after finding out how, so it's 200 hours for the Firefighter 1? Okay. So, and Senator Waters was talking about paying for it. I was just curious if, for example, you had to get a job as a firefighter and stay in that job for a certain length of time before you got the tuition reimbursed.
No, there's not a requirement there. The reimbursement would be eligible once the program was completed. The majority on the fire side, the majority of individuals are supported by a department already. So they're hired by the department. By doing so, they receive essentially an affiliated discount for the costs associated with attending the academy. versus anyone can attend the academy, even if they're not already attached to a department, but they do have to pay full price if they do so.
Okay, thank you. Senator Abbas has a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I believe you answered this, but I just want to clarify for the record. There is a recruitment issue and retention issue that also involves dispatchers.
That's correct.
And do you know how many vacancies there are statewide for those positions? I know there are some local, but
Yeah, I don't have statewide numbers as far as local dispatch entities. I just know that anecdotally they share the same challenges we share at the Department of Safety. At the Department of Safety, as of today in 911, so those are our telecommunicators, we have 10 full-time vacancies out of 57 positions, and we have 5 part-time vacancies out of 11. For state police, we have 10 full-time vacancies out of 30, and we have 15 part-time vacancies out of 34 part-time positions. So we're looking at, around 20%, 30% within the Department of Safety dispatchers.
thank you.
Senator Prentice?
Senator Ward, thank you, and good morning, Commissioner. This might be for you or for Senator Waters or both, but I just want to comment for first Senator Abbas. It's a great question about vacancy rates, and in my own district, I've noticed lately the uptick in advertisements for some of our regional dispatch centers looking for dispatchers or telecommunicators. So I think it's not just a problem that the PSAP for the department and state police. I think this is throughout the state. So I just wanted to touch on the reach, and that's a great question. So so in thinking about non-credit programs, and we talked about, say, Firefighter One or Recruit School that are offered at the Fire Academy, but many emergency medical technician courses, which not say the EMT course itself, but an opportunity for an EMT to advance, say, to an advanced EMT or a paramedic, are not offered at the Fire Academy. The Fire Academy, the staff approves those licenses, approves. Is there any extension of this into that? If it's not happening within the walls of or considered a Fire Academy program, but it's approved by, I don't want that to become a big hiccup, but I do want to just dive into it a little bit and see.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So in my understanding as is written, and I would defer to the senator if he has a different interpretation, the only programs that would be eligible for reimbursement as written would be through the Fire Academy, the Police Academy, or the community college system. So if one of those programs was offered through the community college system, it would be eligible, but if it was through a private entity or some other, it wouldn't under the current language.
Okay. Great. Yes, I am. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I have John, I cannot see what the last name is, from New Hampshire PS.
John Skipper.
Skipper?
Yeah.
Okay. John Skipper.
Hey, John Skipper.
Good morning,
Welcome.
Madam Chair, and good morning, members. My name is John Skippa, and I'm the Director of New Hampshire Police Standards and Training. And I am here this morning to speak in support of this bill. Really, the two gentlemen that have come to you to speak on this have really covered a lot of the ground. Of particular concern was to make sure that the dispatchers were going to be included in these benefits. To Senator Prentice's point, it's pretty dramatic in terms of trying to recruit those people who are telecommunicators and dispatchers. With regard to the police academy, there is some inequity by department. And in some cases, police departments are able to purchase and outfit a new recruit in a way that maybe other police departments, because of their kind of a reduced budget, it's really a tremendous negative impact to send a recruit to the police academy and buy a lot of that ancillary consumable equipment, specifically PT gear and training weapon, which is we call them red guns or blue guns. It's just a plastic gun so that we can train in a safer way. Some agencies are able to provide that. In other cases, the recruit actually has to bear the cost of those ancillary pieces of equipment. And so our hope was to utilize this fund to help kind of level the playing field in that regard and take the lift off of some of those recruits that are coming through. And I certainly stand ready to answer anyone's question.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wants to chime in on Senate Bill 59? If not, this concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 59. This goes to this guy over here. Now we have the final bill, Senate Bill 57. And the prime sponsor, Senator Murphy, is here.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair. Keith Murphy, representing the people of District 16. This bill would create a study committee that would consider the wisdom of replacing our current system of SAUs with school districts at the county level. Outside of New England, school systems are generally organized at the county level. This would bring us in line with most of the country. If we were to handle education at the county level, our schools would potentially benefit from a large cost savings arising from the economy of scale and eliminating redundancies. 12 administrations would cost much less than the current 140. I'm the first to recognize that there would be probable trade-offs to this decision. I've always believed that government operates best when kept closest to the people. And there's certainly a benefit to being able to call your local superintendent and be on a first-name basis. The consideration of the benefits and drawbacks of this decision requires study before adoption, hence the need for the bill. I have provided copies of salary data from across the state for both the teachers and administrators that I believe you may find illuminating. Our state pays over $24,000 per student per year, with about $1.2 billion coming from the state being sent to supplement local funds. Unfortunately, I have seen and heard many elected officials at the local level shift blame for those consequences of their budget decisions to the state legislature. I think that this failure to take responsibility for local spending decisions is frankly reprehensible. We are obligated to the property taxpayers of the state to do all that we can to lower their burden and protect them from out-of-control spending. Our citizens are paying more than ever to teach fewer kids every year. This is simply unsustainable. Even now, as we are all aware, our Supreme Court is considering whether to order the legislature to spend nearly $600 million in additional state spending, which would necessitate a combination of spending cuts and tax increases. And the hard truth is that those who fund education will run education. As we wait to see the Supreme Court decision, it behooves us to begin weighing our options. The potential cost savings of consolidating education at the county level make this bill worthy of consideration. Thank you for your time.
Any questions from the committee members? Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. So I was I read through the bill over the weekend, and the study committee on line 2, to reducing the number, establish a committee to study reducing the number of school administrative units in the state. And then in lines 10 through 14, it starts with a presupposition that this committee is already starting from the place that the SAU framework that we have in the state is ineffective. Instead of studying, is it effective? Does it work for us? So it seems to leap straight over and start with a presupposition. So where, other than a personal feeling that SAUs may not be the way for New Hampshire to organize its school districts, what leads you to want to scrap the whole thing and start fresh with a county program versus having a study committee that actually evaluates how school administrative units work in the state, and might there be a different model? This kind of skips straight over. So I feel like we all missed out on a lot of work product and thought process to get to here.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Senator.
Yeah, thanks.
I am not trying to convince you that this is necessarily the way to go. I'm simply suggesting that we should compare our current model with the model that's been adopted by the vast majority of the country. I myself went to Baltimore County Public Schools. Baltimore County has 1.6 million residents. One school district handles 1.6 million people, and that's not unusual across the country. I will say I did look at the average cost per pupil. I'm holding a copy, and I'm happy to provide it for you, from the Department of Education. I'd like to know why Auburn can operate on $14,190 per pupil, but so many districts, Interlakes Cooperative takes $29,875 per pupil. Freedom is at $36,000 per student. There's clearly massive differences here. And I'm proposing a possible solution, and I think that solution deserves study.
Follow up?
Thank you for the question. And I appreciate that you see an issue that deserves study. And I think that where at least I'm getting hung up on this is lines 10 through 14, where the immediate culprit of what you're framing as an unworkable system has got to be the SAUs. While the county that you grew up in may have, done their education on a countywide basis, the state of Maryland also has a state income tax that they use for education services. So it's apples and oranges, because we don't have, and we aren't looking for, a state income tax. So would it not be more appropriate to study education funding, since the issue you seem to be bringing up is administrative costs? So we're not just studying administrative costs, we're studying a framework. So
Thank you for the question. I certainly agree with you that we are not willing to consider an income tax or any other broad-based tax. Again, I'm proposing a possible way to reduce redundancy and find efficiency. And this is the most obvious solution to do that I can think of. I'm not saying it is necessarily the answer. I think the question is worth study. If I thought it was the answer, I'd be sitting here with a bill suggesting that we move forward with that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to look at the possibility. As far as why I think SAUs might be unworkable, if you look at those two packs of paper that I handed around, I think you'll see a lot of discrepancy, a lot of differences from SAUs to SAUs, and I think the current system is likely unworkable. I think it's reprehensible that some communities start teachers, Gorham starts teachers at $31,000 a year, but they pay a business administrator $175,000 a year. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why do we have that many SAUs paying those kinds of salaries to people who sit in the administration office, but start teachers at $31,000 a year? That's nuts. And I think we need to consider that.
Further questions? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Good morning, Senator Murphy.
Good morning, Senator Prentice.
How are you?
I'm feeling great. New haircut and everything.
I know. How about those Ravens, huh?
You know how to ruin my day.
I didn't really mean to, but it came close. All right. So I know we're just talking about a study, but I'm curious if you've had any preliminary conversations with any county officials.
No.
Okay. I'm working on a project in another part of the state where a county is considering consolidating some ambulance services, and local taxpayers are concerned about the county. Like, how would that shift from, say, the municipality to the county? That's why I'm just raising that. Okay.
Yeah, but both the counties and the towns are clearly creations of the state.
Yeah.
And so if we give them additional duties and shift things around, that's up to us.
Right. I look forward to their involvement in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Webb.
Any other questions? Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So, I guess when it comes to school funding or, for public education, I always took the position you can fund it as much as you want, but if the money's not used responsibly, it's not going to solve any issue. So I think from what I gather from this study committee is your goal to study perhaps the cost of the bureaucracy, I mean, really the administrative positions and whether those are necessary to really facilitate a adequate education?
The goal of the study committee is to determine as best we can how much money could be saved by consolidating functions and eliminating redundancy. And I think that's an important question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
What was the original purpose for having an SAU?
The original purpose was to attempt to move away from towns operating town by town and begin to allow them to consolidate and eliminate some redundancy by putting 2 or 3 towns together as necessary.
So would you say that the SAUs have taken on an additional function or more functions from the original one?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now Doris Johansson.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Doris Hohensee, a former school board member from Nashua. Just in reference to the senator's remarks, there were 3,000 school districts in New Hampshire before the SAUs came about. The state offered more funding to the districts to consolidate into SAUs to save money. So it's an old song. Whether they do or not, I'm not here to tell you. A review of the duties of the superintendent would be useful. There are 21 statutory duties for superintendents in RSA 194F4. If this is a cost-saving effort, a detailed account of federal funds and mandates would be helpful. Superintendents are required to oversee compliance with many state and federal mandates. Some of these are quite time-consuming, invasive of student privacy, or just ineffective to student outcomes. Perhaps it's not cost-effective to accept the funding in exchange for certain of these mandates. Just a thought. And then reducing the number of superintendents centralizes control over a large number of districts. This will make it more difficult for parents in terms of having a voice in the education of their children. It's obvious. This may result in more parents seeking EFAs to leave the district, so that too needs to be weighed. That's it. Thank you for your time. I think it's
Thank you.
interesting.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anne-Marie Banfield?
Good morning again.
Good morning.
So, Anne-Marie Banfield, I'm a parental rights advocate focused on education, and I do support SB 57. At first, I was a little concerned about, is my voice going to be heard if we consolidate? So there is a give and take for sure. However, I'm going to start off by giving you some information because I went to a budget committee meeting in my town of Northampton last week. And I asked the question, what are we spending per student in Northampton? And the answer was $39,000 per student. Now that's the budget divided by the number of students. It's not the state number, it's the actual cost per student, $39,000, which I think shocked a lot of people. We pay $284,000 to our SAU, just Northampton. Northampton is elementary and middle school. It's not high school. We also pay tuition to Winnicott. So we're paying $284,000. Other schools are paying into also to pay for the SAU. At that budget meeting, we were cutting $64,000 from the fire proposed budget and nothing from the school budget. So they're trying to keep taxes at a minimum, which I don't have a problem with, but we were looking to reduce the budget for the firefighters. And the fire chief got up and said, if you reduce this, the fire chief or the deputy fire chief is going to have to cover for a firefighter 2 days a week. 2 days a week, they're going to be doing a firefighter's job if they cut that $65,000. And my point is, if we're going to look at doing this in our towns, the question is, are we going to suffer where are we suffering? Where is the taxes going to come from? And this proposal to consolidate made a little more sense because, first of all, as I look at public education, the most important person in a school is the teacher, let's be honest, and the paraprofessional. And a lot of times when you're cutting budgets, you're looking at cutting teachers. Anytime you say, let's cut the school budget, it's always, well, we're going to get rid of teachers or we're going to get rid of paraprofessionals. And in our district, we tend to look at that, obviously, as enrollment goes down. But what I thought was good about this particular bill was it was not focused on teachers. It was not focused on paraprofessionals, the most important person in the classroom. The SAU administrators, in general, I haven't checked every single one, but in general, make more money than the governor, the attorney general, and the commissioner in this state. And I look at that. Our district had one superintendent, one assistant superintendent, and then mysteriously another one showed up a few years ago. So now we have a superintendent and two superintendents, again, most of them making more than the governor of the state. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Because I'm looking at the teacher salaries. And again, this is where I tend to focus because they're the most impactful in a classroom. So this is kind of what drew me into thinking, you know what, something's got to give, because when we're asking a fire chief to work 2 days a week to cover firemen, and when he goes to a fire, he is supposed to be the person on the scene directing. If he's actually going in, then he's not doing his job. And this is where we were in our particular school district, our particular town. I'm going to give you an example of what I see because I deal with superintendents all of the time in this state. And just in our district alone, last year, well, it might have been the year before, our assistant superintendent worked on something called Portrait of a Graduate or Portrait of a Learner. It is a national program created by an Ohio-based company called Battelle for kids, and Portrait of a Graduate is being used to fundamentally transform the purpose of education. Battelle for Kids was created by Battelle, an applied science and technology company that uses technology to track behaviors. The program was incentivized through policies and grants in the 2015 Federal Education Law Every Student Succeeds Act. And some of Battelle's strategic partners are working towards mass data collection of children's values, attitudes, and behaviors with a company called Data Quality Campaign. Panorama Education's website shows that they use Portrait of a Graduate to build their behavior surveys and data collection. It was just a few weeks ago that parents received a notice that PowerSchool experienced a massive international data breach. What most people don't know is PowerSchool is in the middle of a lawsuit. They are accused of selling student data, including behavior and mental health. And they're sharing the data. My point of sharing this to you is, can we live without this extra layer of bureaucracy in our public schools? Seabrook, which is also part of SAU 21, so Seabrook and Northampton are part of SAU 21, will go to the polls in March, and they're going to decide if they want to withdraw from our SAU. While the superintendent was working on this project, a national fad, their children are scoring around 30% in math. I can only believe that an additional tutor in the school level would be better for the students in Seabrook. I've looked at their curriculum. I did a presentation to their school board back in October. We need strong public schools with good teachers, paras, and principals. If they need an extra administrator in the school to cover some of the duties at the SAU level, that would be reduced, that would still be a reduced cost to taxpayers. I can't help but think that some of this money could be returned to taxpayers, and it would help the residents in Hampton who are now saying that they're going to be displaced from their homes. This was, I think, in the Seacoast Online news, that they're going to be displaced because of the high property taxes. Maybe if some of that can be redistributed to the most important people working in our schools, the teaching staff, and the taxpayers, maybe we wouldn't be looking for fire chiefs to work 2 days a week on a job that they didn't take. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? None taken. So let's just clarify. You're talking about superintendents,
Yes.
and they are manning the SAU. So at the end, if you reduce the number of SAUs, you will reduce the number of superintendents.
Right.
And you were talking about a project that one of the superintendents had
Yes.
started.
The project that I looked at, because I've did research on the actual project, which is Portrait of a Learner. That is going through a private organization where now they are collecting all of this data on students. Okay. They are sharing the data. Some of these NGOs or vendors or who's ever coming into our school, some of them are for profit, some of them are nonprofit, but they're gathering data. As I looked, and I went to the school board and I said, why are you working on this? We have an issue in Seabrook where these kids, the school board, when you go to a school board meeting in Seabrook, they're yelling at each other. The teachers are coming up. It is chaotic. This is why I went to the school board meeting one day. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, why are we spending money on this? Why are you taking your time working on this? We could use people in Seabrook to work on this. Get tutors in, get somebody in to help these kids. So yeah, I brought that up as an example of where the SAU is spending their money instead of really going towards these kids and going towards the teachers. Or, again, $300,000 just from my school district. What is Seabrook spending? And then could they take that money if we now consolidate it and actually, because the voters turned down the budget last time. They're hoping that the voters don't turn it down this time. They have to work within a budget. And so not paying an SAU or not paying them as much as if we consolidate them, would that help them bring the people into the classroom where they're needed? I mean, I just look at this and I'm looking at this going, why are we spending money here at the SAU level when I see it as really needed sometimes in the classroom? And then what's ever left over, maybe it goes back to the taxpayer. But I'm just not seeing this dire need for that administrative level. Now, if we go to a study committee and there's more information brought in that, okay, maybe we need more of the SAUs, maybe we don't take them down as much. But I would like to see Seabrook and some of these other towns like mine, who's cutting from the fire budget, to say, okay, we're going to save money at the SAU level versus firing teachers and paraprofessionals, which is what a lot of times they do. So that's why I brought that particular example in, if that makes sense.
Thank
That
you.
was an example.
Anybody else who has something that they want to contribute to the discussion?
Yeah.
If not, this ends the public hearing on SB 57. And this ends the hearing for the day. Thank you very much for coming. And like I said, if you have questions, thoughts, great ideas, email us.